Custer's Alive, Book Number 3, The Curse of Green Forest Magic, Segment Part Number 5, Audio, Script Version, written by Gregory Wright, G. the Writer. This book was started on March 10th, 2020, and it was completed on October 3rd, 2022. Chapter 8, After the Story. I was happy to announce that it was now 1847 and that all of us were doing just fine. And we had actually made it back home and had been there for a little over a month. A long month just to see each other living and growing again. That was a good thing to consider, minus the fact that it was a whole give and take deal, something that Dad always describes in a perfect way as he simply puts it out in words sort of like, to give and take is described like when you are giving someone something without a favor in return. Chances are when someone truly honors you for giving to other people and recognizes you for who you are and why you are doing that simple task, then you will become the taker and your admirer will become the giver and vice versa. It was very seldom that I had ever taken advice from anyone. In fact, not very often, and especially from my dad. When he first said those words to me, in his calm and casual dad voice, I had always listened to him. But I think I listened to him partially because he had hardly ever given me man advice, and because it was like a life lesson that I could learn from and keep in my heart for the rest of my life. And with my friends and family, period, that has made me value the true lessons in life. In my opinion, we're spending valuable time with my friends and family and exceeding what I really wanted to do with my life. Write, explore, dream big, hope for the great, live life, all things that I had hoped and dreamed for since I was just a little boy. And it was a dream that was for any young boy that was my age at the time. Granted, that was years ago. And since then, young boys had never even thought about what success meant to them. And instead of thinking about it, they became New Age hippies and members of gang violence groups who had killed anyone with the signs of native culture in them, something that was really wrong and needed to be thought through with signs of love and future support, strength at its emotional revival. Since our show up back at home, which would now be almost a month at its finest, the group and I had came up with an agreement that it was best to stay away from each other for a while, but it wasn't the best idea to abandon each other for life, as we were going to try and strengthen our friendships and hope to meet up again one day. And to me, that idea was not only good for the terms of friendship, but it was also good for me to spend time with my family and Ronnie, who had still been recovering from his medical treatment, which he had started last month. But in buddy terms, I would say that he was doing pretty good, given the fact that he had been eating good at all levels. And even though it was the cost of his medical bills that had struck him the most, that's when he had stepped in and had helped him out. And by helping him out, it was me, Mom, and Dad who had paid his bill. Though when I had paid some of it for him, I had to take a couple $100 out of my life savings. And Mom and Dad had done the same too, but only with a little more cash to spare from, as they had been middle aged and had accumulated more wealth than me myself, by far. And just the thought of what they had saved up was enough to scare anyone, including me, their one and only son, the one that they had loved the most. And at least for the most, I had loved them back, as loving them back was a huge sign of respect. And as for respect, they showed me what true love was. That you have to give in order to take, and that over the years, all of their love and support from me had shaped who I was as a person today, wise and great at all means. It was like a Monday for me today, but it wasn't a Monday. And rather than it being a Monday, it was a Tuesday, the one and only day of the week that I hated the most, given the fact that it was like a day of bad luck for me, and that nothing had ever gone my way on these days, other than a few lucky things, a trip in the mud, a pat on the back, and a screw you. But the screw you was from a bunch of drunken guys that didn't know the difference from a man and a light bulb. And luckily for me, I had normally found my way out of those kinds of things, because usually before it had happened, I had played cops and robbers with them, and when they weren't looking, I had jumped a fence and got away. But when I got home, that was a different story, as that different story had passed and I had to let it go because Tuesdays were really different now. And in fact, they were really lucky days for me again. Lucky days like today. Today I was writing a book. I didn't know how I was going to write it or how the basis of it would turn out. But those kinds of things had hardly ever concerned me, as they were a type of fear. And with writing, the only types of fear that I had ever taken accountability for were the actions of my own use of words and what people might get from out of my words. And one thing is, though that fear had found me on not one, not two, not three, but on multiple occasions, the whole thing had shocked me because somehow, for some reason, I had always found my way away from fear because I guess that was the whole point of writing, the developed ability to set further goals and the developed ability to learn from your fears, to further send passion as your number one priority. That was for me anyway. My idea for writing a book about Ronnie Newton Kate didn't just come from anywhere. And instead of the idea coming from just anywhere, it was well thought out and talked about with Ronnie himself first. And when he thought that it was a good idea to talk about it, when he knew that nothing would go wrong, he gave some other good ideas on what to write about. And with a single tip of advice, he told me something that went sort of like, write today. If you wait it off, you'll get too many ideas and the book won't be as great. And write from what you know about me. If you lie, then people will lie. And they'll figure it all out in the end. They always do. Just promise me that you'll be honest with them. Lastly, right away, if you can show them that you are a great writer and that I'm the key to it all, they'll buy it. Have fun. I took his advice from there, and I wasn't going to let him down. At least I wasn't planning on it anyway. It was just the fact that I wasn't that kind of friend to let anyone down, especially when given the fact that it was a friend. Today was the day that Ronnie was still recovering from medical treatment. That and it was also a sign of respect to show anybody how much you had cared for them, even if you had hated them to no end. And no matter what, showing respect was like showing care for someone. And showing care for someone was like forming a trust, a bond, a connection that was. When Mom had started the book, it was sometime after lunch, and Mom had been cooking some Salisbury steak that day. It was a part of a meal routine that we had celebrated every week. It had made him sick to his stomach, so much so, in many situations, he had to excuse himself from the dinner table. And when he did excuse himself from it, he ended up vomiting all over the floor. And now, ever since then, Mom has started fixing all of our meals separately. But since Ronnie has been staying here, we have had to take extra safety precautions, as we really didn't want to see Dad get sick again. So that's why Mom had served the three of us first, and had served Dad last, with something totally different. It wasn't until lunch that day that I had actually gotten the chance to write the book. And given the fact that I had a chance to get some extra thinking done on it, I had just known that by heart I was ready to write it, but it was just the time frame that I had to work on it that had gotten way over my head. I worked for quite some time, and it was unusual. It was unusual because the ideas were just coming to me. It was crazy. I knew it was. It was like a magical power, a feeling of inspiration, motivation, something that had hardly ever chosen me. But it chose me this time, and this time I had actually been doing someone a huge favor, which was pretty good for someone like me. I was able to get done with a few chapters, which was pretty cool. And surprisingly, it wasn't until I had started on the next chapter and I had headed on for a short break that Ronnie had stopped by my room for some odd reason. We looked each other in the eyes at that time, too. He spoke first. I listened to what he had to say. May I come in and talk to you? It shouldn't take that long. I only think that 30 to 45 minutes of talking to each other is the best form of partnership that we can hold on to in a day, if you know what I mean. I looked away for a moment to try and see where Boomer was, and when I saw him lying beside my bedroom door, I had quickly brought my attention back over to Ronnie, who was standing in the midst of it all. Sure, you don't have to ask me anything. You know your way in. Go sit somewhere. I'll shut the door. It was when I had got back to sit down that we had started our talk. And sure enough, as I had sat down for a moment, I had noticed something strange about him. He had something within him that I couldn't describe, like a gift of some sort, like he was meant to succeed. And counting the nails on the wall, that had said it all. That he had grown up with a passion to learn and grow. But if he had truly found himself in who he was, or what he would become, like I did, only he would have to figure things out himself, as I couldn't tell him. But someday, just someday, he would be great, above great. But it was hard to imagine, hard to depict. His looks, his movement, his hair, his color, his character, everything about him, I thought it was pure, holy, dramatic, sober. But one thing is, whatever Custer had wanted from Donnie and Ronnie, I was afraid to find out. And even if it was or wasn't his mom's fault for the dramatic killing of his brother, then who was it? And how could it be that Ronnie had survived this terrible mess, especially the Green Force magic? Was it some kind of gene that he had, some kind of genetic blood code found within his ancestors? Had he developed it? What was it? Perhaps the answers to all of these great questions were given in the talk we had on the very Tuesday in the year 1847, and perhaps the answers to how he became famous over it are yet to be discovered, or will they be left forgotten? But one thing that Ronnie had was the power to survive the Green Force magic, a power that no one had ever discovered, not even Rector, a boy who read Custer's Alive, The Adventures of the Lost number 1,000 to 1,300 years ago, before it was even a thing. And perhaps Ronnie had met Rector in a time traveling machine, the one that Rector had seen as a child on his front deck. And if so, might that be the reason why the pages of his book had flipped to Chapter 1, The Newton Case? Who knows? But as the answers remain unforgettable, someday there will be a truth, an answer to the whole mystery answered, and thrown in the dust. Or might this story continue with the rise of Ronnie Newton Kate? Who knows? But time will tell, and only one could find out before all, perhaps from the evil man himself. Custer James Manning? And might he try to track Ronnie for the rest of his life? Or will Custer James Manning be defeated with a war where people die and where magic becomes extinct for good?